Good morning, everyone. This is Pastor Stacy at Warwick Reformed Church, coming to you with this week's Monday morning meditation. If you joined us last week, you know that I'm starting a new series talking about a rule of life. Simply put, a rule of life is taking a look at the rhythms in our spiritual life and where we're creating space to intentionally be present to God, who is always present to us. And as we talk about a rule of life, I'm using a resource from the Society of St. John the Evangelist, who talks about creating a rule of life as if we were tending a garden for our souls. Where are the spaces that we're making room for God to grow? What are the weeds that we need to pull up, etc.? So if you haven't noticed, I'm joining you today from the church garden. You can see the fence and the church behind me. And I wanted to talk about setting up some structures in our rule of life to begin. Any garden that you create needs to have a fence around it, such as the one that you see behind me, in order to have some structure, some safety, and protection. So our spiritual lives need structure at times. We need to create up some fence posts, some stakes, some grounding places for us to begin thinking about where we're creating space for God in our life. To think about this, I want to read you an excerpt from a book called Soul Feast by Marjorie Thompson. She writes this: certain kinds of plants need support in order to grow properly. Tomatoes need stakes, and beans must attach themselves to suspended strings. Without support, these plants would collapse in a heap on the ground. Their blossoms would not have the space and the sun they need to flourish, and their fruits would rot in contact with the soil. We would be unable to enjoy their beauty and their sustenance. When it comes to our spiritual growth, human beings are much like these plants. We need structure and support. Otherwise, the fruit of the Spirit gets tangled and is susceptible to corruption. We need structure in order to have space, air, and light to flourish. Structure gives us freedom to grow as we are meant to. There is a name in Christian tradition for the kind of structure that supports our spiritual growth. It's called a rule of life. A rule of life is a pattern of spiritual disciplines that provides structure and direction for growth and holiness. It's meant to help us establish a rhythm of daily living, a basic order with which new freedoms can grow. As you start to think about what are the rhythms in your own spiritual life and where you might intentionally create some rhythms, I want you to start this week by thinking about what are the structures, the stakes, the fencing that you need to put up in order to think about having a rule of life. Here's some suggestions from the good brothers at St. John the Evangelist. They suggest putting up a stake of being open to where God is working in your life, or being creative as you think about ways to connect and create space for God. They also suggest putting up a stake of being realistic. You don't want to say in your spiritual life that you're going to spend 10 hours a day praying. If it's not realistic, create spaces that maybe are realistic for you, and be gentle with yourself. Think about how you can easily create space with the God who is already present to you. Finally, some more stakes you might think about putting up are being patient and being flexible on this journey. Thanks for joining me for this week's Monday morning meditation. It's good to be with you all. May God's peace fill you this day.